Now, having issued that asset, I obviously want to get an overview of all the assets that I have in my portfolio, which is what the My Assets view is for. So therefore, remember, Bob actually issued the asset, Alice took the offering, Bob being the lender and Alice being the borrower. Let's switch back to Bob's wallet. So we look at the My Assets view from Bob's perspective. We switch to My Assets and we get to see all the assets that Bob has engaged in so far, which is quite a bit. So here we find again the last asset that we have issued, that Bob now invests in Alice's bond. Let's click on it and we find the next obligations here that are due under the terms of that asset. We find the full asset schedule, giving an overview of all payments that will have to be made over time. And we get to see the tokenization view. Have any payments or payment obligations been tokenized already? We would be able to tokenize here, and we see the transaction history. Again, here the only transaction that we can see is the transaction of issuance itself. No payments have been settled, so no additional transaction that is related to that asset so far. On the right hand side here in that tab, we see again the term sheet, which you are quite familiar with already by now. So what we see here is there is a payment obligation coming up for Bob. Again, recall Bob is the investor. He lends Alice 500 DAI, so he will have to make the initial payment, transferring the 500 DAI to Alice. We see the payment is due at the initial exchange date of the asset that the two have defined, which is the 11th of November 2019. So this payment has not been made yet. We are going to make it right now. So Bob decides to pay it even though it's early. Confirms that he wants to settle the transaction. And we will see, given that Bob has enough funds, which we didn't check, but we can check that right now. So how many DAI has Bob here? He has 980 DAI left. So that should be sufficient to settle that transaction here. So we sent that transaction to the payment router, which is part of the ACTUS protocol smart contracts. And the payment router actually settles the transaction, identifying the counterparty who will be the recipient of the transaction. That can be one person in the case here where we just have Bob and Alice in a peer-to-peer transaction, but it can be multiple persons if the counterparty is tokenized and a number of token holders actually received the asset. So here we get the notification that the obligation has been settled. And that should update our view here right away. And we should be seeing that the payment obligation is not outstanding anymore, but that it has been settled. Let's check down here whether we see the transaction already in the transaction history. No, we don't yet. So let's just wait for another moment. In the meantime, we can browse through the list here and see what kinds of products Bob has invested in already. So we see here he actually took out the loan himself, a zero coupon bond of 1,000 DAI. He invested in another 3-month bond. Those are all bullet type loans, but then he also engage in an annuity, which is an amortizing instrument. So you see there are all kinds of different lending instruments that we can actually issue here or invest in. It takes quite a while. Let's maybe refresh, maybe we see the transaction being through after we refresh. And let's wait for the next obligation view to populate again. And here we see now in the next obligations view, the initial payment is not listed anymore, so it has been made. We see down here in the schedule that the initial exchange date now appears green, so payment has been settled already, and we should also be seeing the transaction down here. Right. So see this other transaction, a settlement transaction, the amount of 500 has been transferred to Alice here, and then at the same time the state of the asset has been updated. So we are now post initial exchange date in the lifetime of the asset. This is that. So in that manner, Bob and Alice, in that example here, progress through the life cycle of the asset, settling payment obligations, or updating the asset in another form if you have a variable rate instrument, updating the rate given a new external rate that has been provided, settling also at the end ultimately the repayment of the loan once we reach maturity. Now this is the peer-to-peer form of the asset, right, as we have said. At the same time, Bob can actually decide to tokenize his future payments that he will be receiving, right? So he made the initial payment, he lends out 500 DAI to Alice, and he will be receiving now all the interest payments going forward and ultimately the repayment of the loan. Now if he decides, he tokenizes that side, creating a number of tokens. In that example here, we just leave the default values, 10,000 tokens that now represent the right to receive all those future payments. So let's just do that. Bob confirms that he tokenizes these future payments. At the beginning, he will be the owner of all those tokens. So he will still be receiving all the payments through his tokens. But he will be able to trade those tokens with others, selling third party 1 token, 10 tokens, 1,000 tokens. Then this third party will actually be receiving the fraction of the future payments according to the tokens he holds. And this is really the power of the ACTUS protocol again. We look at tokenization not only in the sense of I own a fraction of shares, a fraction of a company, a fraction of anything else. I actually own a fraction of the right to receive future cash flows, and the ACTUS protocol will always make sure that those cash flows will be channeled to me, to my tokens, and I can claim those payments with my tokens, with the tokens I hold. So the transaction is still in progress here, tokenizing Bob's side of the asset. Now we see the transaction is through. The beneficiary has been tokenized, and I see here still I'm Bob here. I own 100% of all the tokens in that token contract. Here I have the address of the token contract, can add it to my wallet, can be listed on an exchange. It's ERC20 based, and it uses our extension ERC 2222. It can also be extended obviously with a security token protocol like Polymath or Securitize, in order to make those tokens compliant with regulations, transfer restrictions, and so on. In the transaction history, we should again see the transaction, the tokenization here. Not sure why it doesn't show up, but it should actually. Let's just refresh quickly. So here we see it. So tokenization transaction now is also visible in the transaction history. Now, as Alice will look at the asset in her portfolio, she will see that interest payments are coming up. So we see it here also in Bob's view. She will see that interest payments are coming up that she has to settle. And going forward, she will hopefully settle those payments. The payments will be channeled to the token contract now, not to Bob's wallet, but to the token contract. And whoever owns those tokens will be able to withdraw the payments in the fractions they own. And this kind of brings me to the end of the demo here. We have covered the Explorer, looking at all the assets that have been issued, looking at the details. We have covered the idea of know your asset, in the sense that you need to have all the details that identify the economics of your asset in order to be able to price an issue, to consider it in risk management systems and so on. So the concept of know your asset is really an important concept that the ACTUS protocol brings to the table here. We have covered the off-chain order book that allows everyone to create new offerings, take out loans, or invest in others' offerings, in others' loans. We have seen that the ACTUS protocol really provides flexibility in the sense of products that are covered, that can be configured based on the ACTUS standard. Finally, we have touched the My Assets view that gives everyone an overview of the assets that he is engaged in, allows parties to service the life cycle of the asset, making payments that they have to make, monitoring the state of the asset, whether the counterparties made their payments or not, tokenizing their right to receive payments from the counterparty, then selling those tokens to others and claiming whatever fraction they still own on the future payments. Thereby, I'd like to close this demo. I really hope you enjoy. I really hope you have fun playing around with the portal, with the ACTUS protocol. I hope to get to see the asset list here filling up by assets that other issue. As mentioned, the only thing you actually need to interact, to issue assets, to service your assets and so on, is to be connected with your MetaMask wallet to the portal. There is no other restriction for you to actually interact with the portal. So I'd really like to see a lot of activity here. And whenever you have feedback, please don't hesitate to get in touch through our Discord channel here. It's really easy to give feedback, and we are happy to receive your feedback. So that is it. Hope you've enjoyed, and looking forward to the next video. So have a good day.